All right, so today we're going to dive deep, really get into it with the global market for ultraviolet disinfection equipment.
Okay.
Where it stands in 2025 and where it's headed.
Sounds good.
We've got this really detailed market report we're going to be pulling from, and it covers a lot of ground. I mean, we're talking everything from how big the market is right now, like the
Mhm.
actual numbers, to how fast it's expected to grow,
Right?
like what's the CAGR,
Yeah.
and then we'll even break it down by, the regions, the key players, the actual components that make up this tech,
Mhm.
how it's actually being used, and who's using it,
Yeah.
the end users. I think for anyone who's really plugged into how technology is changing and, global trends, this should be pretty insightful, I think.
Definitely.
So right off the bat, the report estimates that the global market for this ultraviolet disinfection equipment in 2025 is going to hit USD 961.5 million.
Wow. That's already a substantial amount.
Yeah, no kidding. And get this, it's projected to keep climbing to USD 7065.24 million by 2033.
So that's a pretty significant jump.
Yeah, and the report lays out that growth in terms of, um, the CAGR, the compound annual growth rate, which they peg at 7.5% starting from 2025.
So that's a pretty steady upward trend, it's not just a blip.
Right, exactly. And you don't see that kind of consistent growth just by chance. I mean, there's got to be something behind it, right?
Absolutely. The report actually points to a few key factors driving this, but I'd say the most prominent one is this growing global awareness of waterborne diseases.
Oh, for sure. Makes sense. The need for clean water, that's universal, it's essential, and it's just getting more urgent.
Exactly. It's a basic human need.
So, okay, we've got the big picture, right? Now let's kind of zoom in a bit and see how this market plays out geographically.
Yeah.
Where are we seeing the most action right now?
Well, right now, North America is sort of leading the pack, taking up more than 40% of the global market share.
Interesting. Why do you think that is?
Probably a few reasons. Well-established infrastructure for one, and maybe they've just been using these technologies longer. They got an earlier start.
Gotcha. So in 2025 for North America, we're looking at what in terms of actual dollar amounts?
The report says about USD 1465.76 million,
Wow.
and they predict a CAGR of 6.0% from now until 2033.
Okay, so within North America, is it pretty evenly spread out?
Not quite. The U.S. is really the powerhouse there.
Of course, yeah. What's their market looking like?
Let's see. The report says they should reach about USD 1156.48 million in 2025. And their projected CAGR is just a tad lower at 5.8%.
Still really solid, though.
Oh, yeah, definitely. And the report suggests that's partly due to the strict regulations they have in the U.S., especially when it comes to water quality.
So regulations are actually pushing the adoption of this technology. That's interesting.
Yeah, definitely a factor.
Now, what about Canada and Mexico? How do they stack up?
Okay, so Canada's sitting at USD 175.89 million in 2025 with a CAGR of 6.8%. The report links that growth to the healthcare sector. It seems like they're adopting these technologies more and more.
Healthcare, yeah, makes sense.
And then there's Mexico. They're at USD 133.38 million with a CGR of 6.5%.
Okay, so good, solid growth, but maybe not as explosive as some other regions we might be talking about.
Right.
Okay, so North America is the current front runner. Let's shift our focus to Europe now. How do they compare in this market?
All right, so Europe's got the second largest share globally, over 30%, with the 2025 market size estimated at UC 11,148.84 million.
All right, so they're definitely a major player.
Oh, yeah. And that strong presence, I think it reflects, their focus on environmental standards and public health. They've always been pretty big on that.
Yeah, they have. What about their growth outlook?
They're projected to grow at a CGR of 6.5% between 2025 and 2033.
Okay, so steady growth, comparable to North America overall.
Right. But within Europe, the UK is kind of an interesting case.
Really? How so?
Well, their market size in 2025 is USD 193.000 million with a CGR of 7.3%. That's pretty strong.
Yeah.
And the report specifically points to their healthcare infrastructure development, and they're putting a lot of emphasis on infection control in their healthcare facilities.
Okay, so again, we're seeing healthcare as a big driver here, which globally makes sense with everything that's been going on, the focus on health and safety.
Definitely.
All right, so UK is doing well. What about other big economies in Europe? How are they contributing?
Well, Germany's got a sizable market, USD 227.47 million in 2025, and they're looking at a CGR of 6.7%. And the growth there, it's linked to their investments in smart city projects and just upgrading their sanitation technologies in general.
So they're really going all in on that smart city concept, huh?
Seems like it. And then you've got France, their market's at USD 105.69 million with a CGR of 5.7%.
Mhm.
Italy's at USD 98.80 million and a CGR of 5.9%. And then Russia, they're at USD 178.07 million with a slightly lower CGR of 5.5%.
Okay, so it looks like this technology is really being adopted pretty widely across Europe.
It is, yeah.
Now, I gotta say, I have a feeling that the Asia-Pacific region, that's gonna be where we see some really interesting developments, some big growth.
You're absolutely right. The Asia Pacific region, or APAC as it's often called, right now they're holding about 23% of the global market share with the size of USD 950.76 million in 2025. But what's really remarkable is how fast they're projected to grow.
Okay, let's hear it. What kind of numbers are we talking about?
So get this, their CSGR from 2025 to 2033, it's projected at 10.2%.
Whoa, that's huge. Way faster than North America and Europe.
It is. It really seems like the balance of power, at least in this market, might be shifting in the coming years.
It does. So what's driving this massive growth in APAC?
Well, the report points to China as a major factor. Their market size in 2025 is estimated to be USD 399.32 million, with a THR of 9.7%.
Okay, so a big market already and growing really fast.
Right. And that's largely driven by, growing concerns about waterborne diseases, both
Yeah.
from the public and the government.
Sure. Yeah, they've had some challenges with that in the past.
They have, and they're really pushing to improve their sanitation infrastructure.
Makes sense. Now, you mentioned China, but what about India?
India's another one to watch very closely. They're projected to have a KGR of 12.1%.
Wow, even higher than China.
It is, yeah. And that's even starting from a smaller market size in 2025, which is USD 95.08 million.
So that suggests a really rapid and accelerating adoption of this technology in the next few years.
Exactly. And likely for similar reasons as China, large population, increasing focus on public health, things like that.
Right. Yeah, those are some common threads there.
Definitely. And then you've also got Japan and South Korea contributing to that APAC growth. Japan's market size in 2025 is estimated at USD 131.20 million with a CAGR of 8.7%.
Okay.
And South Korea is at USD 114.09 million with a CAGR of 9.3%.
So still strong growth in those more developed economies.
Yeah, and the report links that to rapid urbanization and their need for, really advanced disinfection technologies, especially in their industrial sectors.
Makes sense. So yeah, APAC's definitely the one to keep an eye on. Now, what about South America? What do they fit in?
So South America has more than 5% of the global market share with a 2025 market size of USD 150.54 million. And they're projected to grow at a healthy rate with a KGR of 8.2% from 2025 to 2033.
Okay, so not as explosive as APAC, but still significant growth.
Right. And within South America, Brazil's got the biggest market, USD 64.43 million in 2025, with a CGR of 8.8%.
Right.
And the report says that's mostly driven by their healthcare system adopting these technologies.
And healthcare, yeah.
And then Argentina is showing some really strong growth, too, with a CGR of 9.1% and a 2025 market size of USD 25.29 million.
Okay, and what's driving that?
It seems like the food and beverage industry there is really pushing demand, which makes sense when you think about it.
Yeah, they've got to have strict hygiene standards, especially if they're exporting. Now let's move on to the Middle East. What's the situation there?
So the Middle East has a smaller market share, around 2%, with a 2025 market size of USD 158.46 million. But their projected CGR is pretty impressive, 8.8% from 2025 to 2033.
Okay, so even though they're starting smaller, they're projected to catch up a bit.
Yeah, it seems like they're making some significant investments in infrastructure, and there's a growing awareness of water scarcity issues.
Oh, right. Yeah, that's been a major concern in that region for a while now.
It has, and that's leading to a greater need for, really effective water treatment solutions.
Okay, so within the Middle East, who are the key players?
Well, Saudi Arabia is a big one, with a market size of USD 55.78 million in 2025 and a CAGR of 9.1%.
Right.
And Turkey is also worth mentioning. They've got a really high projected CAGR, 9.4%, even though they're starting from a smaller market size in 2025, USD 12.68 million.
Interesting. And what's driving that growth in Turkey?
The report specifically mentions the rising adoption of UV-based air purification systems there.
Air purification, huh?
Yeah, so maybe that's reflecting concerns about, air quality, especially in urban areas.
Yeah, air quality, that's definitely a growing concern globally.
It is.
All right, finally, let's wrap up with the African market.
Okay, so Africa currently has about 1% of the global market share, with a market size of USD 87.15 million in 2025.
Okay.
And their projected CAGR is 7.8% from 2025 to 2033.
Okay, so while their current share is small, that growth rate suggests, maybe a growing recognition of the need for better water and sanitation solutions across the continent.
Yeah, I think that's a fair assessment.
And are there any specific countries in Africa that are kind of leading the way?
South Africa is the largest market there, with a 2025 size of USD 30.68 million and a CAGR of 8.7%.
Okay, and what do you think? Why South Africa?
Probably because their infrastructure is a bit more developed compared to some other African nations.
Makes sense. All right, so we've covered a lot of ground geographically. We've seen, North America and Europe are the big players right now, but APAC's really poised to take off in the coming years.
It is, yeah.
So now let's kind of shift gears a little bit, move away from the geography, and really look at the nuts and bolts of this technology, the actual components that make up this ultraviolet disinfection equipment. What are the key parts that people should know about?
All right, so the report breaks down several key components, and right now I'd say UV lamps are probably the most common.
Yeah, I mean, that makes sense, right? They're the heart of it all, the light source.
Exactly. And they're pretty efficient, cost-effective, and they can be used in so many different ways, whether it's water treatment, air purification, or even just disinfecting surfaces.
So many applications.
Yeah, and even with the newer LED technologies coming out, the traditional mercury-based UVC lamps, they're still really important, especially for those large-scale projects, industrial settings, municipal applications, where you just need that raw power.
Yeah, I get it. They're the workhorse, the tried and true.
Right, exactly.
Now, the report also talks about another component that's seeing really fast growth,
Yeah.
and it's more than just the light source itself.
Yeah, that's right. The controller units, those are really taking off.
Control. Okay, so like managing the UV lamp, making sure it's working properly.
Exactly. And the reason they're growing so fast is because, people are really looking for ways to make these systems more efficient, more automated, and they want to be able to monitor them in real time.
Okay, so it's about making the whole system smarter, more integrated.
It is, yeah. And we're seeing a lot more integration with IoT, the Internet of Things.
Oh, right, of course. Connect everything.
Exactly. That lets you control and monitor things remotely, which is huge.
Yeah, that's a game changer.
It is. And even AI algorithms are starting to be used to optimize the UV dosage based on real-time conditions, which can make the whole thing even more efficient.
So it's not just about having the light, it's about knowing how to use it the best way possible.
Exactly.
Now, the report also mentioned something called quartz sleeves
Yeah.
and reactor chambers. What are those all about?
Okay, so the quartz sleeves, those are really important because they actually protect the UV lamps themselves.
Okay, so they're kind of like a shield.
Yeah, they keep the water or air that's being treated from actually touching the lamp, but they also make sure that the UV light can pass through, without losing too much intensity.
Gotcha. So they're designed to let the UV light do its job.
Exactly. And they're made of quartz specifically because quartz is really good at transmitting UV light.
Okay, makes sense. And what about reactor chambers? What do they do?
So the reactor chambers, those are basically the containers that hold the UV lamps. And they're designed to basically direct the flow of the water or air so that it gets the maximum exposure to the UV light.
So it's like making sure the water or air gets zapped effectively, disinfected properly.
Exactly, yeah. They're both vital parts of the system, but their growth is more tied to just the overall market growth, rather than being a specific driver of innovation.
Gotcha. Okay, so now we have a better understanding of the hardware. Let's talk about how this equipment is actually being used, the different applications. Where's UV disinfection having the biggest impact?
So right now, the biggest application is water and wastewater treatment.
Okay, that makes sense. Clean water is essential.
It is, yeah. And UV disinfection is really good at getting rid of harmful bacteria, viruses, all those nasty things.
Yeah, it's a pretty effective method.
It is. And the
Yeah.
other big advantage is that it doesn't use harsh chemicals, no byproducts to worry about.
Right. So it's a cleaner solution overall.
Exactly. And that's why we're seeing governments and industries worldwide adopting this technology, for treating drinking water, for recycling wastewater, and even for managing industrial waste.
And it's probably only going to become more important as, as environmental regulations get stricter.
Oh, absolutely.
Okay, so water treatment, that's a huge area.
Yeah.
What are some of the other ways uh, UV disinfection is being used?
Well, surface disinfection is a big one, and it's growing really quickly.
Yeah, yeah, especially with, everything that's happened the past few years, the focus on hygiene's just exploded.
It has, and the COVID-19 pandemic really accelerated that.
Oh, yeah, definitely.
Suddenly, everyone was, hyper aware of surfaces and contamination.
Right, right, wiping everything down.
Yeah, exactly. And that led to a huge surge in demand for UVC disinfection robots.
Oh, yeah, those things are, they're pretty cool, actually. I've seen a few of them in action.
Yeah, they can basically sanitize a whole room autonomously.
Yeah, it's pretty impressive. And I guess they're especially useful in places like hospitals and hotels where you've got a lot of people coming and going.
Exactly. And then there are also handheld devices for, just quickly disinfecting high-touch surfaces.
Yeah, yeah, those are pretty common now. I see them everywhere.
They are, yeah.
All right, so what else? What other applications are there?
Well, air treatment's another important one. Using UV light to kill airborne pathogens and improve indoor air quality.
Okay, yeah, makes sense. Especially with people spending more and more time indoors these days.
Right. And then finally, the food and beverage industry, they're using UV disinfection for a lot of things, sterilizing equipment, even treating the water used in processing.
So it's all about keeping things clean and safe.
That is, yeah.
Now, let's think about who's actually using all this equipment, the end users. Who's buying this stuff and putting it to work?
All right, so the biggest end user right now is the municipal sector.
Okay, so like cities and towns.
Right, and that's because a lot of municipal water and wastewater treatment plants are adopting UV disinfection.
Yeah, it's a good way to ensure clean water for everyone, right?
Exactly. It's all about, meeting those public health standards.
Makes sense. And with more people moving to cities, that's probably only going to become more important, right?
Oh, absolutely. But while the public sector's leading in terms of, the scale of their use, the residential sector's growing really fast.
So you mean regular people are starting to use this stuff in their homes?
They are, yeah. And that's
Wow.
because, people are becoming more aware of the risks of, waterborne diseases.
Hmm.
And they're also concerned about indoor air quality and, surface contamination at home.
So it's about peace of mind, taking control of your own environment.
Yeah, I think that's part of it. And the other big thing is that UVC LED devices are becoming more affordable and easier to use.
So like home water purifiers and air sanitizers.
Exactly. Even some appliances are starting to come with built-in UV disinfection.
Wow, so it's really it's becoming more mainstream, more accessible for everyone.
It is, yeah. And I think for someone like you who follows these trends, that's a pretty significant development.
It is, yeah. It's like a democratization of the technology in a way.
Right.
Now, what about other types of organizations, businesses and stuff? Are they using UV disinfection too?
Oh, yeah, definitely. The commercial and industrial sectors are both big end users.
Okay, so what are we talking about here? Like what kinds of businesses?
Well, commercial applications, that could be anything from hospitals and hotels to schools and office buildings.
Yeah, all places where you want to keep things as clean as possible.
Right, exactly.
Yeah.
And then on the industrial side, you've got, food and beverage processing plants, pharmaceutical companies, really any kind of facility where disinfection is critical for safety and, meeting those regulatory requirements.
Gotcha. Okay, so we've got all these different sectors using UV disinfection, from the government to businesses to people at home. Now, let's talk about, the forces that are really driving this market and any potential roadblocks it might face. What are the key dynamics at play here?
All right, so the report highlights a few major market drivers. First off, there's just more investment in healthcare infrastructure worldwide.
Yeah, it makes sense. With the growing global population and, people living longer, there's more demand for healthcare.
Exactly. And that, combined with stricter infection control measures in hospitals and labs, that's really pushing the adoption of UV disinfection technologies.
Okay, so healthcare is a big driver. What else?
Well, environmental regulations are getting tougher too, especially when it comes to wastewater treatment.
And that's pushing industries to adopt these UV purification systems.
It is, yeah. They have to meet those standards.
Makes sense.
Yeah.
Anything else?
Yeah, the biggest one I'd say is the advancements in UVC LED technology.
LEDs, huh?
Yeah.
So they're not just for light bulbs and screens anymore.
Nope. They're becoming more and more important in UV disinfection.
And what's so great about LEDs? Are they more efficient?
They are, yeah, much more energy efficient than traditional lamps.
Okay, so that's good for the environment and probably saves money too.
Exactly. And they also last longer.
Oh, even better. And they're probably smaller and more versatile too, right?
Yeah, absolutely. And that opens up a whole bunch of new applications, especially for, air and surface disinfection, where you need something compact and easy to integrate.
Makes sense. Okay, so it sounds like there's a lot pushing this market forward. But are there any challenges, anything that could slow down this growth?
Yeah, there are a few things. The report mentions that the upfront cost of some of these UV systems, especially the more sophisticated ones, can be a barrier.
Yeah, especially for smaller businesses or organizations that maybe don't have a lot of resources.
Right. And then there's the ongoing maintenance costs, too, that can add up.
So it's not just the initial investment; it's the long-term costs as well.
Exactly. And then the other thing is that, there's still not a lot of awareness about UV disinfection.
So people just they don't know enough about it.
Yeah, not everyone understands the benefits or how to actually implement these systems properly.
So there's a need for more education, more awareness building.
Definitely. And also a need for more technical expertise.
So finding people who can actually install and operate this equipment.
Exactly.
Okay, so cost and knowledge, those are the main hurdles.
Yeah, I'd say so.
Now, looking ahead, what are some of the big trends that are going to shape the future of this market?
Well, we've already talked about LED technology, and
Yeah.
that's definitely going to keep advancing.
Okay, so we can expect even more efficient and longer-lasting UV systems.
Yep. And they'll probably become even more affordable, too.
That's great. Anything else?
Yeah, the other big trend is automation and integration with IoT.
So making these systems smarter, more connected.
Exactly. That means more precise control, remote monitoring, and, the ability to really optimize the disinfection process based on real-time data.
So it's about efficiency and effectiveness.
It is, yeah. This whole idea of smart disinfection, that's really where the industry's headed.
Smart disinfection.
Mm.
Huh. I like it. All right, lastly, let's get a sense of, who the big players are in this market, the companies driving this innovation.
Yeah.
What does the competitive landscape look like?
So the ultraviolet disinfection equipment market, it's pretty competitive. A lot of companies vying for market share.
And what are they doing to stay ahead of the game?
Well, they're investing heavily in research and development, trying to make their products more efficient, find new applications, things like that. And there's a lot of strategic partnerships and collaborations going on.
Oh, so companies are teaming up to share their expertise and resources.
Exactly. And with the shift towards UVC LED technology and these smart disinfection systems, the competition is only going to get more intense.
So it's good for innovation, right?
Yeah.
Pushes everyone to do better.
Yeah, definitely. And it might even lead to some new companies entering the market.
Right. Always room for new ideas and approaches.
Absolutely. And speaking of innovation, the report actually highlights a couple of recent product launches.
Oh, yeah. What are they?
Well, in June 2024, Solana UV launched a new 235 millimeter far UVC LED. It's a high-power device that has a lot of potential for different applications, from surface disinfection to air purification, even medical device sterilization.
Whoa. Sounds pretty powerful.
It is. And then back in January 2024, Ultraviolet Devices, Inc., they introduced new UV LED surface and room sanitizers specifically designed for healthcare settings.
So they're really targeting that need for super clean environments in healthcare.
Exactly. And those new products, they actually have cloud connectivity, so they can be monitored and controlled remotely.
So they're really leaning into that smart disinfection trend.
They are, yeah.
Okay, so it sounds like it's a really dynamic and rapidly changing market, a lot going on.
It is, yeah.
So just to wrap things up, for someone listening to this deep dive, trying to really understand the big picture, what would you say is the most important takeaway?
I'd say the main takeaway is that the global ultraviolet disinfection equipment market is going to see some major growth in the coming years.
Okay.
And that growth is driven by a few key things.
Yeah.
People are more aware of health and hygiene, environmental regulations are getting stricter, and the technology itself is just getting better and better, especially with UVC LEDs and those smart disinfection
It's
systems.
that'll be there.
It is.
Yeah.
And we're expecting the fastest growth in the Asia-Pacific region, which makes sense given their focus on public health and improving infrastructure.
Right.
And we're also seeing a lot of growth in the residential sector, which shows that that this technology is really becoming more accessible to everyday people.
Yeah, that's pretty exciting, I think.
It is.
All right, well, I think that gives us a really good overview, a lot to think about.
Definitely.
It leaves me with a final thought for our listeners. As you consider how much this technology is growing and how it's being used in so many different ways, think about how it might be impacting your own life.
Mm-hmm.
From the water you drink to the air you breathe to the surfaces you touch, it's all around us.
It is.
And as the technology keeps evolving, what new innovations are we going to see? And how will they affect our health, our environment, our overall well-being? It's a really fascinating field with a lot of potential to change things.
Absolutely.
Well, thanks for taking this deep dive with us, and we encourage you to keep learning about this technology and how it might connect to your own interests and your own work.
Yeah, great talking with you.
Always a pleasure.
All right, take care.
You too.